the world's probably most watched show at the moment.
If it's about male loneliness, if it's about knife crime, or if it's about the incel crisis, it's not an accurate portrayal of any of them. I think most people don't quite understand what's going on beyond the Netflix series. 400,000 men have fallen out of education in the past 10 years. 750,000 men are being abused in the UK right now. Bullying is out of control in schools. Incels are really, really unwell young men who are extraordinarily lonely, have really, really poor mental health, often autistic, usually disproportionately not white and not right wing, and they're really, really lonely and they need help. What can we do to help you meet you where you're at and at least acknowledge what the problem is, where it starts, and how we failed you, definitely in terms of education, certainly in terms of how do we fail to see boys as victims in their own right. 15 men die young every single hour in the UK.
Yeah.
So what's that, about 20 since this podcast started? Most of those deaths are avoidable. 1 in 5 men won't even live to 65 in the UK. That's horrendous. And men are really desperately needing help from us and funding, research, and we've failed them. So many women now will only date men who are as successful or more successful, either educationally or economically, than they are.
Hello people, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another challenging conversation that really highlights some big themes about what it means to be in this world. This for me is about connection. It's about connection to ourselves and others. This is what the whole podcast mission is about. And how do we start to voluntarily come into this challenging situation that we're in about young people in our culture, and how do we make time and space for that? How do we listen to this conversation today and look at all the nuances and the challenges and the many facets to what it means to even be human in this time and the challenging situations we were faced with, and listen and ask better questions and come into more harmony within ourselves around this situation we're in. It's of course the #1 show in the world right now. The responsibility is on us as people, and it's to really take on that baton and run your best leg with it. What does that really mean? Well, do we, as people that watch this show, want to be healthier? And we are only as healthy as the people around us. And therefore, it is our responsibility to look at situations like this and think, okay, what's going on there? What is our relationship with bad behavior, with symptoms that are being played out? So that might look like disconnection from emotion, that might look like violence, that might look like knife crime, it might look like just addiction, behaviors like this that are seemingly more and more prevalent. So what does that say about us as a culture? Of course, this is a complex situation we're in, but it is an important one. Of course, I think it's on all of us to have this conversation and to lean into conversations like this and to follow George and his mission and share it and use the power of technology to illuminate what is not being. Take on that responsibility and start speaking about this more. I invite you to do that, and in this conversation today, we dive into the missing things that were in adolescence and what wasn't, and just to highlight a few factors of what could be going on in this space. So I appreciate you and thank you for following. I would urge you to check out the sponsor below. It is a cacao company that I've partnered with, and they are doing things with deep integrity. If you don't know what cacao is, it's a raw form of chocolate, and you can bring it into your day. You can have it as a supplement for coffee, to bring in more ritual or ceremony to your life. And I start most podcasts with a cup of cacao, and I was waiting for the right brand to partner with, and these guys are worth checking out. So please, link in the description, CG10 at checkout, and you'll get 10% off. Thank you. Enjoy the episode with George TinMen. I appreciate you, because I also know that we're not going to agree on everything, and I'm going to give you some spiritual answers that you're going to be like, and then you're going to give me some great mainstream perspectives that I'm like, yeah, I should really look at that.
It's just more, I try to talk about things where I can have a tangible conversation about it. It's not that I don't appreciate the spirituality side that you bring. It's just I just don't. It's so hard to quantify, and it's very difficult. It seems to be more subjective. But I know the number of boys that are falling out of education every year. That's an objective thing. and we can all agree it's bad. But to delve into your area, it's not that it's not of interest. It's just not something that I know how to grapple with. And there are better people out there, such as yourselves, to have these conversations.
It's good that we can set ourselves up to have these challenging conversations, but also with people that aren't so in our echo chambers. And I'm always trying to actively seek that out. But also just, bridge the gaps between what is such a important conversation. And I just want to celebrate you firstly. I think that's how I want to start, because you're still doing it. You're still putting out incredible content and flying the flag of, the things we really need to talk about but aren't comfortable and are challenging conversations. I want to ask you firstly, out of all the content you've put out since we last spoke, what has been, the most popular?
Well, thank you so much, Chris. It's nice to be back. And I kind of hate compliments because I find them quite painful.
Why?
But
Why?
I just don't like it. Maybe I spent a long time not receiving many compliments, or
Well,
I
take a
don't
moment,
believe, I
take it
just don't
in.
believe you. It's like I remember reading a thread once about asking guys if your girlfriend or anyone bought you a bunch of flowers, what would be your immediate thought? And they were like, they're pranking me. They're pranking me. They're doing something. There's some sort of hidden camera. And that's exactly how I feel when I get compliments. I'm like, this is some sort of joke, isn't
Yeah,
it?
some sort of sandwich effect. What's next?
Yeah. Well, but I mean, to answer your question, I mean, I'm sort of proud of it, and it's always a bit disappointing in some ways. But the most popular post I think I've done since we last talked, definitely in recent memory, was in my International Women's Day post, which I'm grateful that they always do so well. They're often the best posts of a year, sometimes even more so than International Men's Day. But at the same time, that isn't what my account's primarily about. I do that because it's important to me, but I mean, at least it
Interesting.
shows my community are very much hopefully supportive of women and the issues that they're facing. But that was definitely the most popular post of recent. And then everything, everyone's talking about the adolescence, but like crisis phenomenon, hit Netflix series. Whenever these cultural movements happen, the last one probably being Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard, I try to not get drawn into it. Or if I do, I try and have reasonable conversations. I don't want to have a conversation that's just like, just more hysteria. So
Mm.
unfortunately, my posts don't do very well. Like a lot of people were posting all sorts of nonsense about adolescence on Netflix, and they did really well. And then I'll do like a podcast with like a leading expert where we'll go through the research and go through all this, and it's like, oh, boring. So naturally, my content doesn't gravitate particularly well into being viral. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I think popularity on Instagram is not a testament to how solid the work is and how, uh, yeah, good
yeah,
it's just not a marker.
I know.
Like
I'll spend like,
the International Women's Day, it might be that all of the women that follow you have like, uh, yes, they can support this. It's one thing that they're not on the fence about or not like kind of finding it hard to support, but it's like then people just start liking it and it just blows up. But yeah.
well, I think I try to bring. I think hopefully I bring a useful perspective to International Women's Day. It's certainly an issue you wouldn't expect to see on my page, but I mean, so much of the content about International Women's Day is just I find it to be very superficial and like as expected. And a lot of it's like complaining about men, and a lot of it's kind of disempowering. And that my perspectives of women and women's advocacy and feminism in general is that too often it is about women are victims, women are victims, women are victims, women are vulnerable, you're in danger, you're being oppressed. And I don't find that particularly empowering. I don't find it necessarily accurate to most women's experiences. So when I talk about women on days such as International Women's Day, I try to do it in a way that is empowering. And I'm like, you're not victims, you're women. And like, you're amazing. There's so much to learn from you. So many incredible women in history. So I'll use these 20 slides. It was the first post I ever did. That's 20 slides rather than 10. And I was like, look how many amazing women there are. And I can't fit them all in here, of course, but they are amazing. So I did 20 slides of amazing women and girls throughout all of history, right back from like before, 0 BC or whatever. And there's so much to say. There's so much great content. I try to stay away from the infantilization of women as perpetual victims. Of course, they are victims, but I don't think that should not be how we see women primarily. Women are wonderful, powerful, heroic role models, teachers, friends, And that's what I want to capture in my International Women's Day post. So maybe it did quite well because it was a refreshing take. Maybe, hopefully.
Mm, yeah, potentially. Well, my intentions for today are definitely to lean in the conversation of, yeah, boys and what's going on, mainly in the West, and provide some insight to that. So I want to be able to send this episode to parents, to teachers, to people that want to understand a little bit more of what's going on, and from a
Mm,
data point of view, but also from like even our perspectives as men that care and prioritize this in our own awareness and our own education about what's actually happening in culture. So
mm.
I want to lean into that and talk about adolescence and get your thoughts um and where you think we're really what we're really seeing now, and what's predicted also. It's something that's really important. Like, what's the trend, and how is that gaining momentum, or
Mm.
is it not? And is this just like a trend, or something we're just seeing for this generation, and then it's going to get a little bit easier? But hard times make strong people would be the
Yeah.
adage, potentially. So where do you think's the best place to start when it comes to this? Maybe
Well, I mean,
a point of failure of maybe of like what's happening, because there's
for,
so many aspects, isn't there?
yeah. I mean, when we watch Adolescence, the story's been told. It's done. Like quite literally, the girl has been killed by Jamie. Sorry, that's a spoiler, but everyone knows that's what happens. It's too late, and story starts at the end. So really, I wanted to start a long, long way before that, before Jamie had been indoctrinated into what I must say is a very unconvincing portrayal of an incel. And I would like to see the journey he went on, that so-called incel pipeline that basically led to him stabbing a young girl to death.
Yeah,
Uh, in that respect, Adolescence did a wonderful job capturing the societal fallout and impact that such a tragic and shocking crime caused, like the reverberant sort of waves that went out through families, school, community, society. That's amazing. Like it captured it so beautifully. But in terms of the story of how it came to be, dreadful, like really poor. Like there was nothing. There was nothing really about incels or Andrew Tate or the red pill besides a few throwaway statements that were sort of crowbarred into the storyline in like literally one single scene. Like if you're looking for an exploration of the red pill, it's 1 2 minute scene from a four-part series. So it really did not cover it whatsoever. I've always thought metaphorically, if if we talk about these boys being in their bedroom with the door closed and they're on their computers, we were on the outside of that door. We don't know what was going on inside that door in his bedroom. We don't know what he was watching, what he was being exposed to. The bullying wasn't really covered particularly well. We were alongside the adults where we don't know what's going on. So as a viewer, we are in ignorance too,
mm.
which is a useful point of view. But that program,
Isn't that the most powerful point of view though? Just to
yeah.
kind of
But I
counter that,
wanted,
because it's like the horror movie and you never
mm,
see the ghost, or you never see the thing. So
yeah.
potentially it makes it more powerful, because then we fill in the blanks, or we pose more questions than give
Oh,
answers.
I'm not arguing that it's not powerful. It certainly is powerful because I mean, I can speak as someone that talks about these issues, and I can speak as a filmmaker, a professional filmmaker, and it's amazing. Like, if you're looking for a great piece of TV, amazing, very, very powerful. Certainly, conversation starter, as we've seen, but it's not a documentary, and it's not particularly educational, but it's a great conversation starter, and that's what I am. I want those conversations to start now. Let's put down the TV remote, turn off Netflix, and let's have conversations like this one, and
Yeah.
hopefully others that actually look into the science and it explores the sort of the journey these boys go on.
Okay,
But
so there's a part two, the making of, or directed by you. Where do we go, and and what do we focus on, and how do we try and understand this psychological impact?
well, we got to go upstream. I sat down with a very large men's health charity a week or so after that to talk about masculinity and what's happening to boys and the manosphere. And they're in the same sort of hysterical, sort of fear-mongering phase as those who made Adolescence. And they'll be like, well, we want to talk to boys, we want to go upstream and we want to talk to boys about why have you been taught this? Why have you been taught not to express yourself? How have you been taught X, Y, and Z? And where do you learn these things about violence? And then I'll stop them. I'm like, well, then go upstream from there. You're saying these boys are taught these things. So let's go upstream again, and let's talk to parents, let's talk to teachers, let's talk to sports coaches, let's talk to the adults in society who, by your own admission, are teaching these boys or not teaching these boys these things that are very, very important. And I sat there having coffee with them, and I said, do you realize, like, literally today, Keir Starmer has said there are no plans to ban spanking your child in the UK. Like that, they've basically ruled that out. It's still legal in England, sorry, not in Scotland and Wales, but in England it is. And I was saying that is probably the most prevalent and under-discussed cause of partner violence later in life. Like if you're hitting your child when he or she's growing up, you're teaching that child that they can use violence to so-called correct misbehavior. It doesn't correct anything, doesn't even work. But you're basically showing children that violence is the answer. If you don't like what someone's doing, you just hit them. If you don't like this person, you hit them. And that's what partner violence is. That's essentially what happened in adolescence. So I would love to have conversations that hold parents and teachers to accountability, or at least educate them about how we are the ones that are failing boys. We are the ones that are failing through things like hitting children. I talked a lot about at the same meeting over coffee about my first experiences of consent didn't come in high school or primary school, way before that, when I was like, I can't even know how young I was, but basically being forced to kiss elderly parents by my parents. So elderly relatives, family members, like,
Yeah.
you know, Auntie Joan wants a kiss. Give Auntie Joan a kiss. And I'm like, I don't want to kiss Auntie Joan. And now you have to. And then boom, like straight away from the earliest possible age, my consent's been taken away. And like, what do you think that's teaching me for my relationships in the future? So less of this finger wagging at boys, and let's point the finger a little bit more at ourselves as adults, who are essentially, we're the ones that socialize these boys. So if there is blame to be given, then let's give it to ourselves. Now they're just boys. They're just they're literally children. And like, there's only so much accountability we can lay at their feet without taking a little bit ourselves. So spanking children and respecting the consent of your children, no matter who wants to kiss them, that's their consent, that's their choice. I have a nephew who's 2, and he never wants to give me hugs or kisses. That's fine. We do high fives, and that's great. These are lessons that we should be teaching. So no, adolescence doesn't offer that sort of insight, and I reckon those are the sort of things we should be talking about.
I always think, what's the age that we actually do start to take responsibility? And is it always upstream? Is it always a focus on the individual, or actually a focus on the collective consciousness, or how we're actually modeling behavior, whether that's in work, whether that's culture, just in general systems like law and order, prison systems, like how we actually curb behavior, and how we actually all take responsibility for what is happening on an individual level. Like, at what point do children become men or boys become men? It's actually, I don't think that's even the right question, if I'm honest, because I don't think some do ever become men. It's like they just repeat the same behavior in different circumstances. So isn't it always upstream?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in general terms, I believe that no one is born bad. Like, I mean, I'm sure there are some people that are just psychopaths that are born bad, but 99.9% of people are born, it's blank slates in many ways, neither good nor bad. And then it's society that pushes those children into ways that are positive or negative. So if that's the case, then surely we are the ones that need to sort out this problem in the way that we treat boys or don't treat boys or treat girls. And we seem very willing to learn those lessons with girls. We spend a long time teaching them, positive role models of femininity and what it is to be a woman when you're growing up and what you should and shouldn't accept. But I don't see that against boys. And we only ever talk about the issues that impact boys when it's a way of sort of like I said, pointing the finger and blaming them. We don't really give a shit about men and boys' experiences until it impacts a woman or a girl. Like, especially like knife crime. Like, there's two boys stabbed just 2 days ago in Lancashire, like real boys, not Netflix series, fake like actors, like 2 boys stabbed in Lancaster. Don't think anyone heard about that. And like, I live in London, and impossible to ignore how many young boys, particularly black boys, are being stabbed by each other and killed. Like, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 every year. And most of them, if like 95% of them boys, not girls. So this portrayal of knife crime is not accurate. It's not white boys stabbing white girls at all. Very rare that happens. It's not an accurate portrayal of the incel crisis either, because that's also not particularly not traditionally how it happens either. And it's not an accurate portrayal of loneliness either. Like I just don't, if it's about male loneliness, if it's about knife crime, or if it's about the incel crisis, it's not an accurate portrayal of any of them. So yeah, I mean, I guess I've lost my train of thought there, but I just think
Mm.
if we're gonna have a real conversation, let's have a real conversation. That the conversation started now. Let's leave the theatrics behind and let's talk about what's actually happening on our streets and everyone that's impacted.
So in that conversation with this charity, I don't know if you want to mention them. What, where were they at? Like, what were they doing? How were they?
Well, they're very much involved with the men's health strategy, which is happening right now, which is a really positive step forward in terms of the UK actually having a dedicated strategy for men's health, just like we do for women's health strategy, men's health strategy. There's also an ambassador for women's health, and that, I guess that will be hopefully the next stage, have an ambassador for men's health. So we talked about that, on which we're more or less on the same page. My only issue about the men's health strategy is I just don't want it to become like a flyer I just see in my GP somewhere. I want it to be like something real with like dedicated funding and research happening. Then the second part of a conversation, we're talking more about exactly what I mentioned, this obsession of the manosphere and their research into the manosphere and also masculinities in general. Like everyone seems to want to talk about the manosphere and masculinity, and neither of those things I even know what they are. Like you would have thought I would know what they are, but I really quite nebulous, subjective concepts. And
Yeah,
I would say to him, like I said, I have no idea what the manosphere is. I don't really know what masculinity is either. But I do know that, 400,000 men have fallen out of education in the past 10 years. I know that. I know, 750,000 men are being abused in the UK right now. And that's a fact. That's an objective thing, and it's objectively bad. So as much as I'm interested in masculinity and the manosphere, I'd rather talk about things that we actually know what they are and we can all
yeah,
agree, like spanking is not a good thing. So this constant fighting of the ghost beneath the bed, I don't know what we're talking about, but I know that hitting a children is very bad and not excusable in any circumstance, and we need to stop doing it, and we need to start educating parents as to what it teaches children and the damage it does, and how it doesn't even work toward its own ends. So I get
mm.
frustrated with these nebulous conversations around the manosphere.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
quite conceptual, isn't it?
yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, to be honest.
So parents' responsibility, but also like us as a culture, if this is something so significant right now, like that there's a lot of attention on it,
Mm,
with the world's probably most watched show at the moment. Like,
yep.
you've got the main media channels talking about it. Like, what responsibility do they take from actually? It's actually just a real downstream effect of just a cultural society that's
Mm,
seemingly so disconnected from themselves and each other. Isolation. You've got social media. You've got probably, which never gets a say, poor food systems that
mm,
just, if you go into schools or hospitals, you look at the food everyone's eating, this never gets a say in what the impacts of that on mental and
mm,
physical health. Also physical health, which is huge. So all of these repercussions almost of a culture which is just getting a lot of things quote unquote wrong. So
hmm.
what responsibility do like do the government, the media, film industry, like all of these, like what responsibility do they take that clearly have a lot of people's attention? And I just think there's so much, like in our economy, in our like social situation, in our democracy, we just like top down. We just don't take that
Mm.
much responsibility for these like fucking fundamental flaws in how we're all showing up. It's quite fascinating. Did you watch the masculinity debate on Diary of a CEO with
Oh,
Scott
no.
Galloway and
I watched a bit of it, but I mean, I judged it by the title, and the title was ridiculous. It was like something, something, something masculinity. Lonely men are more dangerous than ever! Exclamation mark. Lonely men are more dangerous than ever. And I'm like, fuck you, Stephen, for saying that. That is, you're just basically clickbaiting people. It's a very important
he,
issue,
he
and they're
is
not more dangerous than
he
ever.
is, but do you not think he actually is
Well,
helping put these conversations into the mainstream in a
I think
long
so,
form
yeah.
way. Like he's really doing a lot. I have so much respect for him, even though when he was asked at the end of this conversation, "What's your advice to young boys?" All of it I thought was problematic. I don't think he has a good sense of what being an elder really is. I think he's still figuring things out.
And this, yeah.
Personal opinion, but the debate was great because obviously Scott Galloway has some extreme points of views, like we should be incentivizing people to drink more alcohol because that helps aid social situations and stuff like that. I get where he's
What?
coming from, but it's kind of wrong.
I hate alcohol.
So he raised a lot of things, and he does stand as this kind of figure now of like people look up to him for answers because he communicates really well and he does
Mm,
know a lot of things which are happening, and it's mainly in America. Um, but yeah, it was a good conversation. But he touched upon the economy and what what state we're in terms of how many people have become millionaires, billionaires, how many in that category of like 20 to 30 men, women, but what that does to the other 90% and the erosion of the middle class, probably even more in this country, and how much the extremes of
mm.
poverty and wealth are just the disparity of that is just growing and growing, and what that does to majority of people. And he made a real point. I'll end on this. He made a great distinction that I was like, wow, yeah, 90% of people, we have opted for rewarding the 10% because we all think we've got a shot at it.
Mm.
And we kind of have with like the freedom of information, the power of fucking creating a life we want on our phone. Like this is the economy and this is what people are leveraging to get that, mainly in America as an extreme, but it always comes back here to the UK. So we've opted for this kind of life that you can become a billionaire and you can become this kind of ultra rich, like financially free person. But that only happens to a small percent of people. But because it does, we're okay with it. And
Yeah.
it's fascinating to think from that point of view.
I'm very skeptical of associating being a billionaire, being happy. Like if you look at Elon Musk and happy, he's the richest man in the world, but he's definitely not the happiest man in the world. He looks absolutely miserable. Like he seems to be living a miserable life. And he'd say it himself, he was like, "You wouldn't want to live my life, trust me." And I agree. I don't want to live your life. So I don't know, I haven't watched a podcast, but I'd be very apprehensive around Scott Galloway saying that this is an economic issue fundamental, because I just don't think that is the secret to life. And I feel
Mm,
chasing that economic dream for men, especially when it's less and less achievable now, is a massive part of the problem. And like we should be encouraging men, young men especially, to find meaning elsewhere rather than being, CEO, billionaire man. Like, why not be a great father? Why not be a great friend? Why not be a great husband? That is, so much more to life than money and fast cars. And I feel like Elon is a walking example of that. I mean, most of the rich people I've seen, they look miserable. And like he's had so many, he's obviously got a lot of children. And I was like, you seem to be neglecting his family. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's important. At the same time, like I think it's not about money, it's about feeling a purpose, is what men want.
yeah.
I know my mental health is basically directly correlated with how full my diary is. If I sit down at my desk on a Monday and I look at my Google Calendar and it's just loads and loads of meetings and lots of things, lots of cool things to do, I'm at that. I can actually feel myself feeling positive and my mental health benefits. If I look at it and it's like empty, I'm like, God, I'm a waste of space. I'm a loser. Got no purpose. So it's good to have purpose, but it doesn't necessarily have to be monetary.
I agree. I agree. But I also think it has, regardless or not of whether we reach for it or not, because there are so many people achieving that level of wealth,
Mm,
what does it do to a lot of men and their opportunity to actually provide a family for their um, kids and partner, or even get into that? Because do you follow Gary Economics, the guy?
only recently,
He's
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's
fascinating.
great.
He
I love
has a
that guy.
lot to say, and again, a great communicator, very passionate. But he talks of, we all know it. On the whole, we're not going to do as well as our parents economically, and even to afford a house, like this kind of impact on, yeah, just our own well-being, like how challenging it can be for a lot of people, and like job opportunities that insecure future, like the not even going into the kind of the environmental aspects that also have an impact
Mm.
on us, that were things we're so aware of, like the kind of daunting future, I guess, that also feeds into this. Do you see that come up or have much of a say in
What I think, yeah. I mean, the economy is obviously bad for everybody right now, especially certainly in the UK. It's not exactly great, but I think it's especially bad for men. A lot of the industries that are closing down. I know Donald Trump's announced his tariffs, which I imagine will do absolutely nothing apart from make it worse. But in America, a lot of heavy industry, manufacturing jobs, construction jobs, and that sort of stuff has gone abroad to, like, it's been exported. And those are traditionally male jobs, like manufacturing and heavy industry, very male dominated. You think about the advent of artificial intelligence, like self-driving cars, lorry drivers, bus drivers, taxi drivers, van drivers, they're all going to go. Those are obviously male jobs too. Um, and
Mm,
yes, as things are automated, as AI comes in, as things are exported to other parts of the world, those are mostly male jobs that are being lost. Add to that women entering the workplace over the past 50, 60, 70 years now, which is obviously a wonderful thing. That does actually have a negative impact on men because it means they're now competing with twice the amount of people and they have to basically share the load. So they can't, it's very difficult for a man now to be a single sole breadwinner for an entire family in a way that it was in the 1950s. It's just not as achievable or really achievable at all for the vast majority of men. And one of the problems is that I feel like men are still being held to that level. Like a lot of it, I know we're going to talk about hypergamy, which everyone seems to think is an insanely controversial idea, but so many women now will only date men who are as successful or more successful, either educationally or economically than they are, which I understand. But I feel like they need to understand that it's so difficult for men to be that role. If we're going to allow, as we should, women to escape the archetype of femininity from the 1950s, then we should do the same for men. Like you cannot expect him to come home at 9 to 5 every day and then support you, and it's just not possible. So I feel like we need to change our standards. We've changed our standards for women. We need to change our standards for men. And again, like not it's not just about men learning there's more to life than money, but women need to understand that about men. There's more to a partner than having lots of money. So yeah, hypergamy obviously very controversial. I don't think it's entirely realistic. I know Scott Galloway goes on and on about it quite often.
he does. I put a poll out on my Instagram stories around how important it was for women to date a a man who's wealthy, who has money, and the majority said it's not that important. But I also am not a great
But you
representation of
you probably got a lot
how
of very progressive women following you.
it's true.
And also that's easy to say on a poll.
What does that
But
say about me?
yeah, well, I mean, it's a compliment. But I mean, I when I was dating, I dated loads of feminists, and they had some of the most narrow-minded, toxic dating standards imaginable. They would not date a man under 6 foot. Like they just would not.
Mm,
One of them told me that, and she was 5'2", and I'm like, there's loads of, by all means, someone taller than you, but it doesn't have to be six. Anyway, they had standards, and there's a reason why there's a height thing on your dating by profile, and there's
yeah.
not a weight. There's an education. There's load. There's not. It's not like a boob size, and there shouldn't be a boob size. But it seems like online dating, is more suitable for women. I said it. I know
Oh, absolutely.
it's such
It's
a
an
crude
absolute failure for men, for
it's
sure.
such a crude way of looking at it. But I used to live, my old housemate, she was online dating and I was online dating at the same time. And it sounds so arrogant, but I was just objectively better looking than she was. I'm not saying I'm attractive, but I was just better looking. And I was like, let's sit down and let's do 20 right swipes, and you do 20 right swipes, and we'll see who gets the most amount of matches. I got none, obviously. I could have done 100 and would have got none. And she would, at least half of them would be matches. And I was like, if I was being charitable, let's say we're the same in terms of just objective attractiveness. And I was just like, it's just not.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think. I'm not saying it's great for anyone, but I don't think a lot of women understand what it's like to be, and I don't either. What it must be like to be a
Mm.
conventionally unattractive man who doesn't and cannot meet these dating standards. And that the sad thing about body standards for men is that there's very little you can do about your height or like,
Women getting taller as well,
yeah,
statistically.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there are things. there are things you can do, and they're horrendous. Like there's this thing called limb lengthening surgery where they break your femurs and your tibia and fibia, and they put like a titanium extending rod, and the rod extends slowly over the course of like 2 or 3 months, and it's excruciatingly painful. It's not supposed to be done for like superficial reasons. It's supposed to be done for people that have one leg shorter than the other. But now loads of guys are doing it, and like you should see what they're doing to their dicks. Like it's horrendous. Like the implants, the pumps, the pills, the injections. Like what are you doing? And that's the thing about, obviously lots of body standards around women around heights, but not height, so weight, but you can lose weight. It's hard to add 6 inches to your height. So I feel like men get it even worse because they,
Wait a minute, there's a way I can get my penis to be bigger.
yeah, well,
Who's
temporarily.
doing this? Can we dive into that?
Yeah, it's called the Pneuma. And this, the one I'm talking about specifically, is horrendous. It's basically, think about a boob job for your dick, and it's basically like a silicon, a silicon, like a sausage roll that goes around your dick, and then that's it. It just goes around under the skin, of course. And the reason they got it approved in America, at least, is because if you can show that it's comparable to something else that's been approved, like a boob job, then they'll be approved too. So they're like, well, this is exactly the same technology as women use for boob jobs. It's the same silicon, it's the same thing. But where it's not the same is your dick obviously changes size. Your boobs are more or less the same size all the time. But how is a silicon roll supposed to change when your penis changes? Like
Yeah,
it
it's
grows
not the
2 or 3
same.
times the bigger, and it's
You can't
horrendous.
compare the penis to any other body part.
No, well, I mean, can compare it to
You can't.
we can compare it to women's clitoris because that's what it came from. But yeah, obviously it changes quite substantially since that time. But yeah, I mean, I've always found it very interesting. I've read whole books on women's sexual anatomy.
Yeah,
Uh, so whenever someone says, "You didn't, you bet you couldn't name, I bet you couldn't label a woman's vulva," and I'm like, "I'll probably label it better than you." But and boys, obviously, a penis starts off as a clitoris and then it grows into a penis. But that's an obviously utero. So yeah, you're all right.
there's took solutions. I know we're not far in, but like it's one of the one things that I don't hear enough of. And maybe just because we don't have the answer, but that's okay. But like, what things are providing value? I know Jonathan Haidt is like doing incredible work about social media and
Hmm.
phones in schools. And there's a whole movement that potentially could feed into a lot of education systems. And
Yeah.
yeah, like
Well,
what else is it apart from symptom relief, which I feel a
mm,
lot of culture does. It's just symptom relief,
yeah.
further distractions from actually the truth or the root cause of the matter, whether that's in the medical industry or, we see it everywhere. We see it everywhere. It's just kind of
Yeah.
short-term fixes.
I mean, we could all do with less time on our phones, that's for sure, especially
Yeah,
kids. So I'm all aboard the Jonathan Haidt no phone train. But I feel like you're telling the story when it's over. It's a bit like when my dog, for example, if my dog gets a slipper, I don't have children, so I have to relate for my dogs. But if my dog gets something that it can't have, like my slipper, if I take the slipper away, like the phone, I have to give it something else. You can't just take the phone away from the child without giving them back something. So as much as it's about taking away devices, it's also about giving them something else to do. So it's been very frustrating for Keir Starmer to be whinging and whining about adolescence and how excellent it is, whilst he and his government and previous governments have been sat about and closed down youth clubs all over the country,
yeah,
especially in London. Like youth clubs in London down 30%, knife crimes up 23%. So those two obviously is quite interesting. So if we're going to take phones away from children or like knives away from boys and gangs, we need to give them something else. So let's work out what that is. Let's pump money into sort of youth
yeah,
clubs and leisure centres and libraries and childcare for parents. There's no, again, it's just too much finger wagging. And I just think, Kia, how about you just put down the Netflix and why don't you go and open up a bunch of youth clubs? Because I promise you that'll do a lot more good than whatever it is you're going to talk about next. So I think that'd be great. Like more youth clubs and then more education in general, and just like a fundamental understanding of what, if we're talking about incels, what that actually is. Because about a year before Adolescence even came out, a friend of mine, William Costello, who is like the leading expert of incels in the world, in my opinion, he's done the biggest studies with incels anywhere. Like, and the UK government commissioned him, and his research came back and found that it's not a terrorism problem, it's a mental health crisis. So the solution is not counter-terrorism measures. their mental health interventions. So instead of seeing these boys as terrifying, like they're trying to kill people, or they're a danger to society and to women, let's see them as victims in their own right and in need of help. Literally, the first scene of Adolescence is the police kicking his door down and dragging the boy out to the street. And I get it, great TV again, but that is not what incels are. Incels are really, really unwell young men who are extraordinarily lonely, have really, really poor mental health, often autistic, actually are not white, usually disproportionately not white, and not right wing, and they're really, really lonely and they need help. They don't need to be fear-mongered around. And I feel like a lot of the talk around adolescence is actually going to make it worse, because this is a group of young men who are deeply disenfranchised, deeply misunderstood, and have a lot of resentment towards society for being misunderstood. And now we're just showing them again that we don't understand who you are, and we're not putting any effort beyond literally watching a Netflix series. So I think there's a lot more that we could do alongside what I
Absolutely.
talked about in terms of like helping your children understand consent, not hitting your children in childhood. Like,
Wow, my
yeah,
father thinks we should bring back corporal punishment.
yeah.
So
Well,
there
I
are
disagree.
many that also agree that there's like a lot of kids that know their rights and they know what they can and can't get away with, or that they
Mm,
can and can't get in trouble for, and they leverage that. And
mm,
it's again, well, why is that coming from? Like, why would a child do that? Like, what kind of cry for help is that when they are, are acting out or demonstrating certain behavior that's not conducive to um it's almost like a I want to talk about a thing I was invited to do. I was giving a workshop to 40 teenage boys, all
wow.
mixed ages. And I want to go into that. But like when a child acts out or misbehaves, it's a signal. It's like something's not this isn't just happen. Like culturally, it's happening more and more and more. And kids are they're just not meeting. Maybe it's education where it is at, or there's just certain things that have come in as we've illuminated that just there's a lot of disconnection and there's a
Mm,
lack of meaning, a lack of like focus. Like there's so many threads to this. But basically, I was facilitating a workshop. I've never done any youth work before, but it's been on my mind for a long time. So I'm glad it came in, and it was radically challenging. Like I've never been challenged that much. It was over the course of 2 days. It was like a camp out for a co-ed school, but all for boys. And it was so revealing to offer certain things like games first, and then like connection pieces, trust exercises. And I really got them to try and work as a team and step into their leadership, responsibility,
mm,
accountability, and like communicate like these themes in their lives of where they are perhaps not showing up fully, or like they're having challenges or issues. And everyone is just trying to make everyone laugh. Everyone is that I mean the it's mad how many flashbacks I had of my youth, and I'm sure you can relate, of the priorities for teenage boys is literally liked or hide. Be
mm,
liked, stand out and be liked for that, or hide away. And there's such a spectrum of it, but it's like everyone's just trying to fit in or not fit in enough. And it was radically hard to actually get their attention for more than 15 minutes without them engaging in an activity which like required their full presence, which
mm,
worked. And we played games for a couple of hours, like kind of productive, like team games. But it ultimately was challenging to communicate to them any depth, any level of depth. They didn't really know what to do with it. And I just, the attention was one thing, but also just their like almost motivation to want to learn a little bit about how to um, how to be a little bit better.
mm,
It was just so challenging. So how do we even communicate to the youth? It's a mission and a journey I'm on to like go back there. There's an amazing organization called Journeyman, if you've heard of them.
yeah,
They do
yeah.
mentorship for teenage boys. I'm off to their like flagship event at the end of this month to learn a little bit more, because it's a whole different way of facilitating events and yeah, communicating. I don't know if if you have anything to kind of touch upon here about how even do we get through to teenage boys that do act out, or that I notice so much bullying happening, and
Hmm.
and and it's just rife. Like, what was it like for you as a teenager to, yeah, really want to be seen in a certain way? Um,
I mean, I guess my first thing I want to say is that I feel like I want to take a moment just to say how amazing teachers are that have to put up with that. Like you're talking about how difficult it was for like what, two
yeah,
days? Imagine doing that every day and getting paid virtually nothing. Like, so I can't understand that anyone could be a teacher now in this country. The lack of money and lack of respect and amount of effort is incredible. So thank you,
mm,
and also to parents too in that same area. I don't have any children. Um, but I was a young boy. I have lots of experience of bullying from both girls and boys. I did really poorly at school, very bad. Like I left with like more or less failed everything by the time I left in A level, as did my dad. And it was only, years and years after leaving education, I realized I'm not an idiot. I'm not stupid.
yeah,
I was certainly naughty. I wasn't like a violent child, but I was just cheeky, as I'm sure you can expect. But my teachers and parents always thought I was just bad, naughty, a naughty boy, and what I would go back now and tell them about, I'm not naughty, I'm just bored, I'm just
yeah,
disengaged, I'm not interested. This learning style is horrible. I'm a bit like the boys you talked about, where even on podcasts I'm a nightmare because I'm just constantly doing all this,
yeah,
and the idea that anyone can learn properly by sitting down for 5 hours every single day and reading from a book quietly is so absurd, especially for boys. That fails everyone, but especially boys who you cannot get a boy to sit down for that long quietly
mm,
and reading without him throwing the book across the room. And we need to realize that's not him
yeah,
misbehaving, that's him disengaged and bored. So we need to think about how we're going to teach those boys in ways that are more in line of what they need from us. So let's meet the boys where they're at, most of all, most importantly. I know there was a survey recently where they did ask boys, and I'm so sick and tired of the one voice I've not heard in any of this about talk of the fanfare around adolescence. I've never heard a single young boy. I've not heard any boy. It's always a celebrity or Stephen Bartlett or like Keir Starmer or someone else. And I'm like, where are the boys? Let's get the boys in. Let's hear what they've got to say. Like literally, I've not heard a peep from them, which is a massive problem and symptomatic of the issue as well. They actually have asked boys, what is it you like most about school? And they said three things. The first was nothing. The second was PE. PE. That's not surprising. PE, and they're not doing that anymore. PE is just going out the window, and I need more of that. More physical health in general for boys and all children. And the third thing was substitute teachers. So the idea is that they hate their actual teachers, but they love it when a substitute comes in. And I'm like, you know what? Those are probably the three things I like most as
yeah.
well.
You'd
I was
agree.
like, I don't like anything, first of all, but PE is excellent. And thirdly, I did like the substitute teachers because they were just a bit kinder to me. So yeah, I would learn from those three things, and I'd ask them, what else can you teach us? Because it sounds like a lot to be learned. More PE, more unique learning styles that make use of the ways in which boys like to learn, more physical activity in general, more spatial learning, more creative skills, more workshops,
Mm,
more male teachers, of course, excellent. Like there's a lot of research that finds that male teachers are less likely to problematize boys' behavior, and boys act up more and are more disobedient to women in classrooms. I think that a lot of that's because a lot of teachers who are mostly women don't understand as well as male teachers where these boys' so-called bad behavior is coming from. Like I said, I would understand, I think, because I'd be like, I know what I was you when I was your age. I would be throwing a book at my teacher just like you are to me. So fundamentally, it starts with asking boys, what do you need from us and what are we getting wrong?
yeah.
And make a Netflix series about that. I reckon I'd love to watch that Netflix series. And like, what can we do to help you meet you where you're at least acknowledge what the problem is, where it starts, and how we failed you definitely in terms of education, certainly in terms of
Mm,
how do we fail to see boys as victims in their own right. A lot of
yeah.
these boys, one in six boys, will be sexually abused before he's 18. That's a lot. That's not even that less. Not that's comparable to what women experience. And I never see boys ever mentioned as victims, and it's a massive deal. Like they'll experience sexual violence, they'll experience physical violence, they'll experience bullying, and we need to see these boys as victims in their own right. As was slightly alluded to with Jamie, but not really. Like he got a few nasty comments and then stabbed someone to death. That's not what happens. But there was a stark correlation between really, really intense, violent bullying, relentless bullying, and boys that then go on to have violent fantasies and become violent themselves. So a bit like the spanking, we've got to ask ourselves, who's teaching them these lessons? And maybe it's bullying. Like bullying is out of control in schools.
Yeah.
It's basically like the abuse of children on under the like it's like institutionalized abuse, if I'm going to say it, by schools onto children. And there was, I feel like a lot more accountability has to be had to stop bullying, because the damage it does not only to children but to all society is huge. So yeah, a lot to talk about, and all none of it was discussed by adolescents from what I saw.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful points. I mean, if me and you are in the playground and we're 14 and we start to hold hands, chaos. Like that
Yeah.
just wouldn't it just wouldn't be okay. It would be we'll be getting stuff thrown at us. Like in our culture, the like gay is just that as a derogatory term is just so much of an issue
Mm,
everywhere. And how long ago was that not the case? Like
mm,
it wasn't always that case. Like when boys showed affection or boys had any sort of remote femininity, it was not demonized or it was not laughed at. And
mm,
like that in our culture is an issue, but it's so normalized that people just think it's just the norm. It's not the norm. You go to other
mm.
cultures, other countries, and it's not the norm. And it's a real big problem. And how do we actually like lean into that a little bit more and start to have conversations about it? That so in this workshop, we challenged the kids, we put them into different groups and we challenged them to keep the fire going at this campsite for 3 days. Well,
Wow,
two nights, so 3 days.
that's cool.
It was incredible. They all did it. Some, predictably so, slept in, and they basically had an hour shift for our 8 hours of the night, and they changed the next. The next night was more voluntary, which they did do. They didn't need to, but they all chipped in, and it was incredible. And the conversations around the fire with teachers and kids about this kind of stuff, like it really illuminated a lot, and actually allowed space, which they don't get in school, to discuss and just to have less less of a kind of a contained amount of time to talk about it. And it was just more like popcorn, just freestyle. And they just don't get that time. They don't get that downtime with their teachers. And it's really important. Even just bringing in someone like that at school, quarterly, every year, so when kids can actually have a lot of outside of the school environment as well, where everyone's in uniforms and everyone's kind of got this hierarchical structure. Actually, it's not about that. How do we all coexist? Because teachers don't actually want to le teach a lot of the stuff that they have to.
Mm,
They were very honest about that. So it's like we have to teach. I don't want to lose my job ultimately. So how do we meet in the middle? I know you're not going to want to learn this, but I've got to get you to a certain standard so I don't lose my job. And it's just having that conversation. It's very level-headed about it. Um, I wanted to ask, is there any initiatives or any movements that are trying to and making progress, like reform and change curriculum in schools?
yeah, there are. Obviously, there are lots of organizations that are going to schools and talking to boys, but that doesn't mean they're all good. A lot of them are very not good. What you described sounds great. I mean, I'd love to do that myself, like to try and keep a fire going. I think is such a like primal thing to remind anyone of, and like that's it's got everything. It's got teamwork. You've got goal orientation. You've got new skills you're learning, and you've got the achievement at the end of it. So that sounds great. I'm all I understand what you're saying about encouraging boys to show physical affection towards each other, like holding hands and whatever else. But I'm also apprehensive around that, where a lot of boys don't want to do that. A lot of boys and a
Yeah.
lot and like we are in danger of feminizing boys to the point where the ways in which boys express themselves, we're not seeing that. We're missing that completely, and we're insisting upon
Mm,
what is a more feminized traditional view of emotional communication, and also just expressing yourself isn't as important as understanding your own emotions. I'm not as interested in how you're able to express your emotions, but I care most of all about how are you able to understand your own emotions. So you know
yeah.
how you're feeling and you know what you're going through, so you can deal with it. And then how you choose to express that or not express it is totally down to you. I know it's similar with crying. We're encouraging men to cry and boys to cry, and that's fair enough, but what you're saying is that unless you're crying, you're not feeling anything. But I don't cry that often, and that's totally fine. Doesn't mean I don't feel as much as you or someone that cries every single day. So I I'm certainly encouraging boys to express themselves in new ways, but only in ways in which they choose. If they don't want to hold hands, they don't want to cry, that's totally fine too. Like I was just watching The Apprentice just now, and their task, it's just come out. The task was to make a clothing label for men. And there's a group that was 2 women, 2 men. They were all about allowing men to open up. That was the whole brand. Let's open up to men. Let's get men to open up. And they were like, we need to challenge convention, so we're going to make a crop top and a dress for men. And ironically, the 2 men in the group were like, we don't want to do that. That's just not what, I just don't think that's good. And the 2 women in the group were basically telling them what they're going to do. And I'm like, you're about helping men opening up. And the 2 men in your group are just being sidelined as you practice this sort of weird virtue signaling where you're insisting men wear dresses. So
Wow, that's
yeah, I
where we're
thought,
at.
yeah, and I was just like, if you want to wear a dress, but you don't have to wear a dress. And like, it's not, I don't want to get too caught up in that tokenistic displays of so-called emotion.
Yeah, I
Again, I'd
think
rather return to
you're right.
how do you want to express yourself, boys?
Yeah,
Whatever way you choose is perfectly good.
yeah,
That's fine.
yeah. When we get to the point where we're telling people what they need to be doing,
Yeah.
it's an issue. We can't be telling people you need to cry or you need to
Yeah.
open up. If you don't want to open up, that's fine.
Mm.
Um, I want to dive into the crying point of view because I think it's powerful. Because I remember hearing you say you don't cry,
Mm.
and I don't think that's an issue. But what I would say as a part of that is if sadness and like really expressing like a lot of sadness, if that's not happening, what out of the other primary emotions also isn't happening? And if that is in context to, I actually struggle to feel anger, I actually struggle to feel joy, I actually struggle to feel like fear,
Mm.
I'm just quite numb. And then if that's the case, then I'm like, okay, you're disconnected from kind of
Yeah.
below the head.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people talk about how, boys can be sad too. And yeah, boys should be able to feel sadness. But it's not just sadness that are rounded off and dialed down for a lot of boys and men. It's all emotions. So you're right. They often don't allow themselves to feel joy or happiness or love or commitment or intimacy or vulnerability. It's not just about not feeling sad, although that is part of it. It's about the entire gamut of emotional behavior just being completely dampened down and
Mm,
desaturated into like a kind of a grayscale living. So it's not just about not feeling sadness. It's a lot more than that. I don't cry, but that in no way means that I don't feel as all the same emotions that you've described. I mean, I feel sadness and a whole series of emotions very deeply every single day. It just doesn't come out of my face in a way that it does for some people. Um, and I just think we need to start to understand that men don't express themselves in the same way as women, and that doesn't make it any more or less valuable. And
mhm.
also understand what crying is. Uh, Crying is we're the only animal in on the planet to cry. No other animal cries in the way we do. And the experts on crying that I've listened to talks about from them, uh, and they find that crying has no biological benefit in terms of it doesn't do anything for you.
I
It,
so disagree with
but
that.
well, you disagree all you like, but what it does do, it basically signals to society that you're in pain and you need help. That's what it does. It basically signals for help from your peers.
And is that
And
not a biological
sure, but
advantage?
when I say biological, I mean like, does it actually have a biological thing where you're clearing out your tear ducts or whatever like that? That's the evidence is not. I'm questioning that evidence, but I'm saying that traditionally, crying was developed as a means of signaling your own pain to others,
Yeah,
the
it's like
hope that
yawning.
they would come and yeah, a little bit. Although there's a lot of difficult science around that as well.
Yeah.
But it signals I need help. So I often wonder, is the reason why
Mm,
so few men do cry is because they've learned from a very young age that they are not going to get helped if they do cry. So yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense. What if a man doesn't cry? Perhaps it's because he never received help when he was a boy as a result of crying. There's a lot of evidence. It's called alexithymia, which basically means putting words to emotions. Alexithymia, I think it's Greek, and that basically describes exactly what you talked about. It's someone's ability to express themselves, their emotions, particularly through words. And the Levant, the psychologist who coined that term, his research found that boys at a young age were actually more expressive of their emotions than girls. But at some point in adolescence, or maybe before that, they stop being as expressive. And he found that alexithymia, which is someone's inability to emote, particularly male normative alexithymia, he found that was taught. It's taught again by parents, sports coaches, friends, family, teachers. And we need to understand that boys are what we teach them. And we need to teach them love and compassion and support and understanding, rather than just telling them what they should be or shouldn't be and how they should or shouldn't emote and that sort of stuff. So it always comes back to the boys themselves and like, what, tell us, you need to educate us as much as we need to try and educate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Children are our biggest teachers, and I don't think they stop at the age of 7. Like they're the most connected beings
Yeah,
on the planet.
so
And
smart.
yeah, we
Yeah.
need to learn a little bit more of like
Mm.
our templates and our natural norms over social norms. So the reason I disagree, I think, with the crying not being a biological benefit, it depends. Obviously, that's measured in many different ways, I'm sure, but I'd say it is cathartic. It's a release. Like my body is purging. It's having some sort of energetic release that is. It's a healing crisis, almost
Mm.
ultimately. Like I'm going through some sort of healing and purge. But I couldn't cry for many years, and I always used to get jealous of people that were having that moment, and because I really wanted it, I wanted to feel deeper, and I wanted to. I didn't want to be disconnected from the sadness because it is linked to the sadness that I couldn't feel.
Yeah.
But now I can. And what helped me get there actually was magic mushrooms and ceremonial doses of magic mushrooms, because that allows people to go less cerebral and more emotional into their bodies. And uh, a lot of other drugs do this, but they allow us to connect and stay there with the emotion. The releases I've had in ceremony on mushrooms, I've just been able to be with stories, narratives, like beliefs that have held me back from fully expressing myself, or having a, a disconnected story about me and my body and what and how accepting I was with certain body parts, or how I just judged myself for
Mm.
so long. And we all do this to some extent. There's a spectrum of it. How well we want maybe this to be different or that to be different in our bodies. But
Mm.
I had a real like judgment of not feeling enough, but also from like a physical point of view. I wanted my triceps to be bigger or whatever it might be. And magic mushrooms allowed me to just like be with that story and just almost to, like just like love it and not change it. It was it's been radical in like my journey.
Well, I have a friend that thinks that part of everyone's education is being given a dose of mushrooms when they're 18. And I mean, I'd love to see that rolled out as a pilot study and see where that leads us. But yeah, I'm sure you're not the only person who's had those cathartic
Yeah,
experiences.
it's powerful, especially for men. But I also think the evolutionary point of view around this would be that emotions got us in trouble. It's very simple. Like if we expressed certain emotions at times in our lives, it would have just got us killed.
Mm.
Trevor Boehm, who does the Man Uncivilized in America, he talks about this a lot, and it's such a big point. You've got the Marlboro Man who just disconnects from his emotions, the Marlboro cigarettes advert, and it's just like I don't need anyone. I'm a lone wolf,
Mm.
and that archetype and collectively, yeah, we've just bought into that narrative, and it has helped us. Go on.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, it makes me think about the history of tears, where men would frequently cry. Like like it was a show of masculinity, traditionally speaking. There's like stories of like huge Greek battles and knights in shining armor, and even samurais openly weeping as a show of strength. And then it all seemed to change during the Industrial Revolution, where you can't be crying if you're working on a factory line. If you're a man and like you're working with a machine that could literally just rip your arm off, like there's no room for emotions, there's no room for talking. You can't, like you said, like Trevor said, like it's dangerous, and you you basically get put in an environment where tears aren't allowed and are in fact dangerous. So it's taking some time to undo that a little bit, but I'm just cautious around not overcorrecting to the point where we're infatuated with the idea of crying. And also, like sometimes I wish people wouldn't cry. Like,
Mm.
there's a lot of performative crying that really annoys me when
Yeah.
someone is being like, they've done something wrong, they've made a mistake, someone's, holding them accountable, telling them, and they'll start crying, and they'll win over sympathy as a result of crying in a way that's performative. Like, I know when I was growing up, I've lived and grown up with a lot of highly emotional women in the way that is the way you described crying. And whenever I would try to express myself to them, they would cry. This is growing up and in relationships. They would cry, and it just totally took away my voice, because it's hard to, stand up to someone when they're crying, and you basically end up stopping whatever you're saying and then apologizing to them. So the amount of times that someone's done something that's harmed me, I've told them in a way that's just like, holding them to account. I'm not shouting at them, and they'll cry, and then I end up apologizing to them for what they've done and how it's upset me. So in some ways, I wish people would cry a little bit less sometimes and not allow their emotions to totally rule them. And that's in some ways in which I think a lot of women can learn from men's traditional ways of handling emotions, or stoicism, you might call it, where it's not necessarily about expressing emotions, although that is important to learn too. It's about understanding them, processing them, and letting them go, rather than expressing them in the ways we described. Like, processing emotions or expressing them are both useful tools. Men typically do one, women do the other, and we have and we should learn more from women in terms of how to express ourselves. But sometimes it's best to not do that, and sometimes it's best to understand how we're feeling, notice it, be like, I can't do anything about the situation, I'm going to let it go. So there's lessons to be learned on both sides.
Absolutely. You've got a spectrum of it. You've got very
Mm,
sensitive men that I don't work with, but people I know, that's their that's their coaching. They work with
mm,
men that are too sensitive and they can't kind of pull back a little bit and connect to more of a consciousness,
mm.
masculinity, which is the primary root of what masculine is. It's the structure, it's the boundaries, it's the consciousness, and then
Discipline.
the emotion is within that, which is the femininity. But yeah, it's a lot of over feminized men, of course.
But it's really about whatever's best for you. Like, when you're telling me your experience of crying being very helpful, I mean, I've got total respect for that too. Like, I'm not saying that's wrong for you. That's what seems to
Mm.
be what's great for you. It may not be right for me, and that's fine too. But I just think it should be about where each man is at an individual level, and understanding that it's not one size doesn't fit all. I mean, I do enjoy crying. The odd occasion happens, and I do understand what you're talking about in terms of it being cathartic. But it's just not something I've learned or comes naturally to me anymore. And I don't want to feel shamed for not being able to do something. That's sort of, a lot of it's beyond my choice or control.
Yeah, imagine not being able to connect with that emotion and then judging yourself for it because society says you should. How
Mm.
problematic is that? Seeing
And
it on a billboard, it's like, oh, for fuck's sake.
yeah, I know. And it's just like, especially if it's a center point for like men's mental health advocacy. And it can be dangerous, because I know I work a lot with Susie, the researcher in suicide, and she talks about a lot of men who are suicidal will go to the doctors and tell the doctor, I'm suicidal, but in a typically masculine way. They would say it in a very matter-of-fact way, like this, about the crying, about the tears, about the heightened emotions, but what they're feeling is no less important, and the doctor will not see it as severe as someone that comes in tears and cries. But yet both those people are at the same level of risk. So there's a lot of male distress that's slipping through the net because it doesn't fit into this archetype of typically feminine expression of emotions. Like, some men will just disclose suicidal intent as a joke at the pub, and it's like, it's very difficult to know. Are you joking, or is that real? So I think we need to challenge the way in which we express ourselves, and one isn't right or wrong. It depends on who you are. Even like things like self-harm, for example, we have a very specific view of self-harm. Like, my former girlfriend self-harmed quite a lot, so I know quite a bit about it, often around cutting. And again, when you go to doctors with self-harm, we see it as cutting typically, but men self-harm in different ways, typically, like often by like punching walls, for example, or getting into a fight that they can't win. Those are in many ways acts of self-harm, no different to cutting, but we see them differently. We see a man who punches a wall, oh, he's a violent
Mm.
man. He's just trying to show you what he's going to do to you if you're not careful. And I'm like, actually, he's probably very sad, and he's actually doing that to hurt himself. And like, he's not being violent any more than a woman that's cutting herself. So we need to challenge our perspectives of how men and women emote or share happiness or sadness or distress, and understand that one isn't right or wrong. They're just, different
Mm.
different methods of different people.
Have you seen Connor Beaton's recent program of how to work with men?
No, no, I haven't.
So yeah, you know him.
Yeah, I'm
Don't you?
speaking to him next week actually.
Oh wow, on your
Mm.
podcast.
On his podcast.
Oh great, awesome. Yeah, I'm sure he'll ask you about or the myth of vulnerability and what your thoughts are on that.
The
Because I
myth.
think yeah, he's got a big chapter in it in his book. Because he took, and I really agree with him when it comes to again one of these cultural trends of like men need to be more vulnerable. And it's
Mm,
like, well, no, maybe not. Like it depends. Context is everything and like who you're being vulnerable to. And not every woman can hold that. And should you be bringing all your issues and insecurities and secrets to a relationship, for example?
mm,
I don't
mm.
know. I don't think so. Not everything. Um, and that's okay. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I know I have people that are close to me that went through a really lot of depression after having children. And I'd tell them, I encourage them to go and see a therapist. And oh no, I have my husband and I'm like, okay, he is probably going through shit too, and he's not qualified, and like you need to go and see a therapist. Like it's not right to expect your partner to
yeah.
support you in every single possible way in which you want to be supported. It's not feasible and it's not kind or fair. So yeah, I mean, it's yeah, and just going back to what you said about vulnerability, and it's like you can't expect someone to pick up the pieces in that way every single time, and it's not, no, it's just not right. And I feel like we need to look to other connections to fulfill that entire spectrum of human needs. It doesn't have to be one
Mhm.
from one person.
Yes. So, in terms of Connor's course, I wanted to ask you about what industries you mentioned therapy, but what like other, let's say, services for men to gain help do you feel need more attention or more focus? Like a lot of it is centered around potentially women. So like what do you think how men can actually be supported? Like what needs more attention or like what areas of our yeah, I guess health services that need to cater and need more funding or need more attention?
I think I'm a big fan of social prescription, which, for those who don't know, it's an alternative to clinical prescription. So if you're dealing with depression,
Hmm.
anxiety, or whatever else, instead of being given like a maybe medicated, you're given a social prescription and you go and join a group. So it might be an allotment, or it might be a men's sheds, for example. It might be a walking group. It might be a dog walking group.
Cold
It
water.
might be a cold water group. It might be like a bushcraft society. It might be anything like breakfast clubs and stuff like that. That is where the solution is at for me. I've been to them, I've seen them, I've had people go and talk to me, and they're so good. The men's sheds one is really great. I think it's basically sheds all over the UK where men and women go, but it's normally men, particularly older men who are dealing with loneliness. They go and it's like a workshop and they build and repair toys for local families. And
Wow.
it literally melts my heart. Like the idea of these lonely men who would otherwise be sat on their own, maybe widowed, they're going to these sheds, they're building and fixing toys for local families. And I was like, that does so much. That's like a win-win-win. First of all, those men get that sense of camaraderie, friendship, and purpose, which we discussed. Second, people getting their toys fixed for free. Third, we're not medicating people like selfishly, like loneliness and suicide has such a massive impact on our economy. To have these people actively participating back in society again is a third win. So triple win, and that's where I want to be at. And they have blown up all over the country; they're everywhere, and it's in many ways it's a damning indictment of how we've neglected men's health and how we failed men's health. That these are charities that are set up outside of NHS, outside of the government, often by men themselves, to be like, I've had enough. Like I know where a man, the bereaved man, who set up a charity for other bereaved men who often have lost children, and they go on hikes up mountains. They're hiking up a mountain right now, actually, and I just think that's so good. And there needs to be far, far more. And either join one of those groups or maybe even set one up, or talk groups. Obviously, they're very big
Mhm.
now. Group talk groups, so many charities like Andy's Man Club, Talk Club, etc. that are basically, a room full of men. You all go once a week.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's free, sometimes it's a small fee, and you just basically everyone has 2 minutes or 5 minutes to talk about themselves, and they'll listen to other men. A lot of it's about not just about speaking, about listening to how other men talk. So you're learning those skills too. And I've been to those as well, and they are just so transformative.
Mm,
And so, yeah, I would
absolutely.
say less clinical prescriptions, more social prescriptions, I think would be, and boxing clubs, for example,
Mm.
especially for young boys. I connected with a few different boxing clubs that are specifically for young boys to get them off the streets. In the way that I said that these groups are closing down and these boys need something to do, so they'll go and often join a gang instead. So if there's a boxing group where they could use that aggression, that frustration, that physical fitness side and channel it into something that's actually a lot more positive towards themselves and others and controlled under a guidance of another man, what's not to like about that?
Are you optimistic about the turning tide of the data in the coming decade?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I spend a lot of time like in the mud, like with the very worst people, like the people that I often engage with. I get sent horrible stuff. Look at this comment section, look at this article, look at this post. I'm like, yeah, it's horrible, but I feel like that's the very extreme anti-male bigotry that is a problem. But I don't think most of the world feel that way about men and boys. I think most people don't quite understand what's going on beyond Netflix series. And if they were given the chance to learn more about what you know, what I know, I'd have a lot more compassion. And there's a study by YouGov not long ago where about 90% of people in the UK had no idea girls were so far ahead at university. They actually didn't think girls were ahead at all. But like I said, there's about 500,000 boys have dropped out of uni in the past 10 years. It happens every single year. And they're behind at every stage of education, particularly higher education. And it's a massive, massive deal. It's going to be even bigger than the class gap soon, the boy girl gap in school. And the problem is not just that itself, but it's so few people, like less than 1 in 10 know that. And if you told those people, those remaining nine, I reckon the majority of them would be deeply concerned and wanting to do something about it. So that positions us in the area of education and informing people. I there aren't many solutions because no one's asking us questions yet because we're not there. We need to let people know the world is not as you thought it was. Boys and men are going through significant issues that are often structural and long lasting. And one of them is education. And we need to learn what they are and challenge ourselves a bit more, I think. So I'm positive, yeah, I think positive, but it's just slow, isn't it? And it's frustrating when you see something like Adolescence where it's a chance to talk about these things in a way that I would like to talk about them and have been talking about them and will continue to talk about them after it's all over. And I just feel like it's an opportunity missed. We become enamored with the Netflix bit and it's not led to the conversations I really wish it would have. So
Mm.
yeah, mixed bag.
How are you forecasting your work and how to reach more people with these conversations? How to kind of incentivize that it almost leverage certain things that are going to capture attention and focus. And you do that really well. But what do you think is the main aspects that you're going to focus on? Like, is it content creation? Is it connecting more with charities that already have these networks?
I need to find a way of making it financially sustainable because it's absolutely hemorrhaging cash.
Mm.
We talked a lot about like opportunities, and I'm very lucky that I spent 10 years building up enough money and capital for my business that I can afford to do this for free for
Yeah.
5 years as I have. And that's a massive privilege that I'm happy to do, but eventually I have got bills to pay. So from my own point of view, I need to find a way in which I can at least make it sustainable. I'm not looking at profit, just some of that means I don't go bankrupt to be nice.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I live in a van to have these conversations.
yeah,
So, woo.
yeah. I love your van. I mean, it looks amazing. But I'm not quite van level yet. But I'm sure we'll have a second van parked up next to yours with me in it. But as for societally, I think we need to have unapologetic education of everybody around the true experiences of men and boys and gender equality in a way that is two-way street. Like doesn't minimize women and girls' continued experience of sexism, but then at the same time introduces us to the missing half of that conversation, which is the one that impacts men and boys, and that needs to go beyond encouraging men to talk and or cry and to talk about the very real issues around education, around sexual abuse, around like domestic violence, prison reform, homelessness, drug addiction, suicide, workplace deaths, and all of that stuff. Not more than just, throwaway catchphrases about crying and talking more, which I'm sure are helpful, but are not complete solution. So I think education, as Tony Blair said, and whatever comes next, I don't know, but that certainly is the first step.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Yeah, I appreciate you speaking to these themes so passionately and also grounded. I feel like there's a sense of groundedness and optimism, which is really important.
Yeah, I can be dramatic. I can be quite dramatic too sometimes. But yeah, I try my best to be calm because people want you to be angry, and I am angry sometimes. But if I act in the way in which I'm angry and I'm ranting and I'm insulting people, which I do sometimes, then I feel like I'm only enabling the people that try to frame me that way. I become the angry white man that everyone thinks I am, and can be sometimes. But I try to remain calm because I have to be calm. I can't afford to be angry and start calling people names, and I can't afford to get things wrong because if you get
You're on
one thing
camera.
wrong, yeah. And if I so often that people go through my content with like a very fine tooth comb, and if there's one single inaccuracy, which there rarely is, and if there is, it's often just a mistake. They're like, I knew it,
They
knew it.
when I blow up, they're gonna have a field day.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see. But yeah, yeah, I try to be positive. I don't always feel positive, but generally speaking, I think we're going in the right direction. And like the men's health strategy was a really welcome sign that
Mm.
it seems like politicians are starting to take men's health more seriously, which is something they're not talked about in this podcast, but men's health is just dreadful at the minute. Like obviously suicide, the biggest risk to my life and your life and all young men's lives, but it's a lot more than that. Like 15 men die young every single hour in the UK.
Yeah.
So what's that, about 20 since this podcast started? Most of those deaths are avoidable. 1 in 5 men won't even live to 65 in the UK. That's horrendous. And it's just like worse. It's worse than women's by every metric, more or less, and very little said and done about it.
What do
So
you say? 1 in 5 won't live till they're 65.
1 in 5 men won't live to their 65 in the UK, which is crazy.
That is
Absolutely
crazy.
crazy. And like men die more at every single age than women. They live less life than women in every single country in the world.
Yeah.
It's every single outcome. Like they have worse health outcomes across every group, socio-economic, racial, ethnic group. They're all bad, they're all worse. Like in America, if you write down the top 15 causes of death, men lead in 13, like almost
Mm.
all of them. And there's so little done about it. So little done. And there needs to be way, way more awareness that health is a lot more than what we're told. And men are really desperately needing help from us and funding, research, and we've failed them, and education as well. I mean, so much to say. No one's
Mm.
saying it apart from, you and I and a few others. And
There's a lot. There's a lot. I
not
mean,
enough.
not yes. It's a lot's happened in a short space of time, and that, yeah, can be said in every aspect of what we've talked about. But I think what's
Yeah.
important to mention what was the charity that are doing the hike you mentioned?
Oh, strong men.
Strong Men.
Shout out to strong men.
Yeah.
It's so funny because
So
I went to their fundraiser last year, and this guy sat down next to me called Chunk, I think, and he was just, as you'd expect, a massive, big, burly, bold man.
Chunk from
Like,
Strong Men.
yeah, Chunk, I think his name was, and I was just like, I totally stereotyped him. I was like, oh, I didn't expect to see someone like you here, and I'm sure, do you struggle? And he was like, no, I cry all the time. And like this guy was just the archetype of ultimate masculinity. It's like I think he's sure he was actually a football hooligan in a former life, and like he lost someone to suicide. He went on one of his walks, and he said he never cried, never talked, in one walk. By the time he got top of the mountain, he was bawling his eyes out, and now he volunteers. He leads the walks now, and I'm like, that is just, I just can't. I just it fills me with so much hope. It's people like that. So
Mm.
strong men, yeah, shout
Yeah.
out,
Collective spaces. You
yeah,
touched
yeah.
upon them. The shared initiative sounds incredible.
And it doesn't
Like,
have to be a charity. It could just be text your mates.
yeah, yeah, doing something together
Mm,
with an intention and a goal and a container. It's powerful. It's changed my life, and it's what I do.
good. Well, thank you for that. It's
Yeah,
important
man.
work, to be fair. I mean, it's not always the most financially rewarding, but I'm sure you feel that you're doing an important thing for a lot of men and women that desperately need your work. And
Mhm.
I'm sure you'll be thanked most of all in a future life. Like your children, grandchildren, if you choose to have them, they'll be very proud of you. And I guess you're ahead of your time a little bit.
Maybe I think it's our priorities. Like, what are our priorities, and getting clear on those things and values. And a lot, a lot was readdressed in COVID, and I think healthily done in like family, time, nature,
Mm,
and outdoors, and like just actually health and routine, and it really, yeah, kind of got forgotten about. But like, if we really sat down and understood our priorities and values, we can readdress things quite quickly. And it is about connection. It's about creating memories and experiences, and yeah, not like spending time doing things which don't serve us.
yeah, like don't be Elon Musk, like you said. Like he's got so much money, but he's miserable. And like
Yeah.
learn from him. Don't be like him. There are more important things than money in your life.
I
So
feel
go
some
on.
content about Elon Musk coming.
I've done a little bit before, but I just hate that guy. If I'm honest. He's an idiot. But that's a podcast for another day.
We've given a lot of people lots to think about. I think
I hope so.
there's a lot
Yeah.
enough fodder in here to contemplate and to, yeah, readdress our perspective. What are you most excited about this year, this summer? Like, what have you got in the diary?
Uh Honestly, a lot of it's been very emotionally exhausting. Like I've been struggling a little bit now. Like I feel like I'm limping, much getting content. I'm on a break currently, but
Mm,
I'm not like like creating content with the same enthusiasm as I used to. I think
mm,
that's often because I'm just tired, and it, often it's a thankless task, and that slowly does get to you. But I'm currently talking to a brand now in sexual health for men that might actually just be able to pay me to create my content as I choose to, and then put some sort of sponsorship with them.
yeah.
And that I just feel like waking up having known that, even if it doesn't come to anything, at least there's an opportunity that it makes me feel a lot more valued and more hopeful, and that gets me out of bed. So I'm back more towards the well, it's but well, hang on, I think I'll just disconnect the microphone. Why?
No, you're good.
So, yeah, so that I mean, some interesting collaborations coming in the future that I hope
Yeah.
bear fruit. And if nothing else, they make this sustainable in a financial way, in which I discussed, but they also make me feel valued in a more important way. So that's what I'm excited for. I think just the freedom that gives me and the motivation that gives me, and hopefully will be felt in my work too.
Mm,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. And lastly, what's one question you think everyone should ask themselves to be a better man?
Uh, I just think now we're at a time when I just don't think men should be the ones that decide what sort of man they want to be.
Really?
Like I
That's
feel,
radical.
well, yeah. I feel like everyone seems to be telling me what they think a man should be, or who a man should be, or what masculinity is or isn't. And I feel like I'm sure a lot of men are getting tired of being spoken for and never spoken to. And I want to speak to those men. And I want to be like, I understand how you feel. It's very annoying to be lectured constantly by people that don't know who I am, that don't understand the normal experience of normal man. Often celebrities like Stephen Bartlett or what's his face was crying and doing photos and trying to present himself as a who's that guy? I can't remember his name now, but I get frustrated at the men's mental health space being taken up by very economically powerful
Mm,
celebrities that don't really know what it's like to be a man, certainly not a normal man. So I'm sure those normal men are out there getting very frustrated about being told who they are, who aren't, or what they should do. And in many ways, I think you are valuable, like you're important, you're not toxic, you're not broken or need a repair, and that's okay. And
mhm,
I wish more men would just be proud of who they are and want and be valued for who they are, rather than being, told to be better or take accountability and whatever else. So I
Mm,
try to listen to those men, although I am obviously quite privileged too. I'm not a celebrity, but I try to speak on behalf of normal men a little bit more than others, perhaps.
yeah. Yeah. For me, we can always be better. And I concentrate a lot on growth. And I guess it is individual. I also have space for like collectivism in a way, like
Hmm.
focusing on someone else and other people and family and friends. I think that's missing
I
in our
think, yeah,
culture.
I think it's about cultivating what's already there in many ways,
Yeah.
not being like, okay, well, this is who you are, let's get rid of that. That's toxic and whatever else. This is the politically approved archetype for masculinity, the sanitized version. This is what you need to be. I'm not saying that men can't grow or
Mm,
can't do better. They certainly can, as can anyone, but it's about meeting them where they're at and helping grow who they already are and want to become, rather than trying to tell them to be something
for
else.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, man. Anything we've missed you want to touch upon before we leave?
Only my hopes for the men's health strategy, which is probably the most important piece of change recently. And I really hope that it's meaningful. And I really hope those who are sculpting it right now behind closed doors have the bravery to use a more expansive view of men's health that isn't purely about our physical health, but more about how
Yeah.
society and the structures of politics and stuff like that place pressure onto men, and how that has a detrimental impact on their health. Like the amount of men, fathers I've spoken to whose lives are being absolutely destroyed from losing their children in family courts, and the corruption they tell me about, and how horrendous and how many suicides that leads to. Things like family courts, child custody battles, they need part of the men's health strategy. Things like men who are being abused and the amount of damage that does to a man's mental health and physical health, and it also leads to suicides. I feel like those men who are being abused, they need to be part of the men's health strategy. Men in prison, locked up, thrown away, exposed to horrendous trauma, criminalization, like those are part of the men's health strategy. Like men's health can't just be about prostates and blood pressure, although those are obviously important too. It's got to be out there as well. Like really everything and anything could be mental, like bullying.
Absolutely.
A child who's bullied, that's part of the health strategy. A boy who's like sexually abused in childhood, that needs to be part of the men's health strategy. Those are obviously unpopular, which is why I'm talking about bravery. And there's people in those rooms that are going to be pushing for that, and I really hope they listen, because
Mm.
we consider those things women's health issues, and they are. A woman that is abused is a women's health issue, and we need to do that for men.
Yeah, it's just the house of our
Yeah,
people.
yeah, totally.
It's our society. It's the everything affects everything. It's yes, we can focus on men 'cause we're different to women, but yeah, it's
Mm,
just we're just trying to again improve and look at our blind spots around
yeah,
where
and just
we're
like
heading for
and just
sure.
try and guess encourage people more generally to be a little bit more understanding and not just to react in a knee-jerk way, in which they probably have joined this podcast, and they certainly would if they go on my page, but just to understand that there are things you don't know, and it can be uncomfortable and it can prickle, but sometimes you just got to lie down on that bed of nails and have those
Mm.
uncomfortable conversations. Otherwise, someone else will have them, like Andrew Tate, and they'll talk in different ways. So we need to understand that we need to have these conversations to help our boys, because if not, they'll go have them elsewhere, which helps no one, and least of
Yeah,
all, the boys themselves.
yeah, for sure. They'll end up just banning certain things and further distractions from the truth, which is
Yeah.
fundamental things. We'll see. Um, Jordan Stevens, do you follow him?
Yeah, he's a friend of mine.
He's epic. I love his
Yeah,
content.
he's a good lad. I won't, I'm sure he won't mind me saying that he often does ask me for like guidance on a few things, and I'll see him do a TV report or appearance, and he definitely wraps it in his own very charismatic way. But I told you about that. Him and I are very much on the same page on spanking, for example. We're both like really trying to raise awareness around the damage that does to children. And yeah, we talk behind the scenes quite often. And he's great.
Mm.
He's a really good guy as well. A lot of people I meet like him turn out to be arseholes behind the scene. But yeah, Jordan, happy to recommend him. And he's a good man, and highly charismatic, uh, and very likable.
Mm. Our souls behind the scenes that need our help.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not one of them. And I try not to
No.
spend too much time with the arseholes.
Wow, it's going to affect them, right? When we focus on the state of men's health. I'm glad it's men's health and not men's mental health because we're just missing the mark when we just concentrate on mental.
Mm. Well,
Yeah,
they're the same thing. Like,
I know. It's everything off. It's easy to act your way into a new way of thinking than think your way into a new way of acting.
well,
As
that's a new view of male suicide that's coming out, where male suicide shouldn't be seen as a primarily
yeah,
a mental health issue, because the majority of men who are suicidal don't think they have a mental health problem at all. They have a
yeah,
problem relating to a lot of the things we talked about, like
yeah,
child custody battle. And in many ways, a man who loses his child, his relationship's over, his marriage is over, he might lose his house, he might lose his child. I can totally understand why suicide might be an option to that man. I don't think he's mentally unwell for thinking that way. I totally understand. And it's in many ways, it's like a rational decision he's making. It's a rational solution-based outcome, I've heard it called.
for sure. But
And
it's sorry, go on, yeah.
I was gonna say that he's not got a mental health problem. He's got a child custody problem or a family problem or relationship problem or a job problem, not primarily mental health problem.
Yeah, well, I'd say we're too in the head. We're too cerebral in these modern times. We think a lot. We act from that place all the time. We're trying to rationalize our way out of most things and logic. And for me, and I want to end on this point, is like having a deep connection to like what we're a part of and like the earth being our mother and
Mm,
having a relationship with that in some capacity. Maybe that's, going for a walk and really like connecting with what we're a part of and the mystery of it all. Like we have to be having that conversation too. And I just don't see that. I think like we've severed our relationship to the planet in many ways. But unless we start to reframe and connect back to the roots of what we are a part of, then we're just going to keep on, yeah, severing our connection to ourselves because ultimately that's the most important. And also, this is a big point. I don't know if you have these conversations around women being inherently connected to the earth because of their cycle every single month. Well, men don't have that. We don't have a connection to the earth and our bodies in that way. So the lack of initiations and clear demarcation from boys to men in our culture just isn't there, and that opens up a whole thing of initiation. But I feel it's a big missing piece that men just don't have that inherent connection to themselves in the earth in that
mm.
way, and it's such a big piece.
Totally, yeah, totally. I mean, I grew up in the countryside. I'm a country bumpkin. So I grew up in the trees and the forests and the fields before iPhones even existed, and I'm so grateful for that. And what you said, totally agree. And I'm always reminded of that by my dogs I talked about earlier. But
Mm.
like I watch them in the park, and like my dogs can literally get more happiness out of a stick than I've ever experienced in my entire life. So I watch them, and I'm like, well, clearly it's about perspective. Like it's just a stick, guys, and they're like literally having the best time ever. So I try to learn from them, and it's not necessarily about material things. It's about how you perceive them
So
or
true.
value them. So yeah, so much we learn from dogs. I tell you, that's one of them.
Beautiful, man. All right, thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank
And
you.
yeah,
Yeah, let's come back again. It's been great
yeah,
chat. Great chatting.
yes, bro.